Today we're going to take a look at the MOBILETrak warehouse management solutions from ID Solutions for the SEDC or UPN integration. On the screen you see our startup screen or our login screen. You will use your same login credentials as UPN. Once you've entered in your credentials, you can simply choose the location you're signing into by selecting the drop-down and scrolling through your available locations, selecting the one you want, and then press Login. So the first module we're going to take a look at is the work order or job release here from the main menu. To enter that function, I simply can either tap on this work order or job release icon, or from the quick navigation menu I can also choose it from here. You notice that I have a notification tag that is letting me know that I have a pending job within MOBILETrak. So if I click on this work order icon, it'll bring you to the main work order or job release screen. Now here there's a couple of things that you see. One, that orange or amber notification tag that was on our main menu shows up here as a pending work order or job. Pending means that some other MOBILETrak user has went out and picked from the pick list material items and assigned a quantity, but has not yet submitted it back to UPN. We do that for a couple of reasons. Sometimes we call that a pause. That may be due to we pick the items and we put them in the crew cage for tomorrow, and we're going to wait until the crews come and pick them up and actually release them out of the warehouse. So that's one particular reason why you would want to have a pause or a pending work order. So I can simply click or tap on the pending work order or job, or I can enter the job number here at the scan or search for work order or job line. Now I can either scan a barcode or type this in. For this demo I'm going to be typing. But as I type in the job number, MOBILETrak goes out to UPN real time and looks for that job number. If that job number is invalid or closed, it would not show up here as an available job to pick from. Now if you were using a barcode scanner and you scanned that 190588, at the end of that decode it would perform an enter or a carriage return, which would be the same thing as clicking on this this job number 190588 field. Now when I click on it, it's going to open up the work order or job detail. And just a description of what the screen is. Basically we see the work order or the job number, right? We see the default expense account or GL account that we're expensing it against, which in this case is my new construction or my 10720 account. If I want to change this value, I can simply unlock it and then edit it and then lock it again. It also gives us a brief description of the job. Now you notice here I've got this big blue button that says Apply Changes. Apply Changes across the board in MOBILETrak refers to submission back to the ERP, in this case UPN. This will only show up when you've got a work order or a job in a pending status, which this one we already know is. So I also have the full complete pick list that was originally staked by the engineers. Now we try to keep everything or base all of our information in lists. So you have here three categories or three different independent lists. The first one is our current items, then we have our pending or partial items, and then we have our completed items. Current items are items that have not been released or previously picked, and each line gives you the item number, the description, the bin location that it's currently stored in if available, and then it gives you the disposition of the staked quantity over the previously picked quantity. In this case, 0 picked out of the 15 that were staked. 0 indicating why it's in the current because we haven't done anything with it yet. Likewise, down in pending, this would be something that has been picked partially. So in this case of this connector here, you see that the quantity picked or the quantity staked was 9, and the quantity previously picked was 5, which means that it's been partial. And then completed are any items that have been picked in full or more. More being an instance where somebody has added material to a work order using the Add Item to Work Order button that wasn't originally staked. Now, in each one of these categories, this is our pick list. I can sort my pick list by either bin location or item number. So if your warehouse is laid out by bin locations, you can sort it by bin location, which allows the user to be guided from MOBILETrak how your warehouse is organized. You can also amend the list to be ascending or descending by simply clicking on the arrow here. And each one of these independent categories can be handled that way. Now, once I've made all my decisions on how I want to sort my list, how I want to pick it, then I can simply begin my pick. Now, if I know the item number and I just want to walk up to the bin location and pick it, I can either find it on my list here, right? Or I can scan the item. Now, if I scan the item, as I type, the list filters based on my typing input. So if I complete that part number, it'll filter that list all the way down to that unique item. And if I was to scan that part, if I was to walk up to that bin location and scan that part number, it's going to process that carriage return at the end of the scan and take me right into my item detail screen. So now, MOBILETrak has guided the user to that bin location. He's standing in front of that part, which has a barcode label on the rack. He sees that he needs to grab part number 00524012, but he's being forced to validate it. Now, this was one of those settings that we talked about earlier. If that validate part number is enabled, it's going to ask the user to rescan that barcode to verify that what he's actually grabbing is correct. That can be disabled or enabled. Now, you notice here this input line is blue. Any input line that's blue indicates that nothing has been entered yet. Anything that is red indicates that whatever you've scanned or typed does not validate with the original part number. Anything that is green represents a valid input. So now these two match, which means that it's valid. MOBILETrak will allow me to move down to the quantity picked, and it'll also enable this update item button. Now, down here, we see the description of the part. We see the work order or the job that we're expensing it to, the bin location that I'm standing in front of. We have the on-hand quantity enabled in our settings, so it's showing us that we have 1,000 of these units available. The staked quantity is 15, and I haven't picked any of these yet. Now, in the settings, we've also enabled the default to the staked quantity, so it's going to fill automatically the quantity that is staked into this current quantity to be picked field. Now, I can adjust this however I want, and I can put in the quantity that I want and then hit update item. Now, if I was to put in more than what I have available, I have that negative quantity warning turning on and alerting the user that UPN says you don't have enough for what you're trying to pick. However, if you can physically see those parts in front of you and you know that you're picking it correctly, then you could simply hit OK, and MOBILETrak will allow you to accept that. Or you can hit clear, which will clear the quantity field. You can put in the correct quantity and then hit update. Now, in the settings, we had the auto next turned on, and what that will do is when I update this item, it's going to take me directly to the next item on that list based on my sort criteria. So now I'm being sent to bin location A2-C. It's asking for this bracket, right? So I simply walk up to the bin, I scan the part. As long as it's valid, it's asking for quantity 1, which none have been previously picked. It's defaulting to the staked quantity of 1. I hit update, and it takes me to the next item. And I can continue that down the list until I'm complete. Now, once I'm done, I haven't completed the list yet, but let's say that I'm being interrupted. I have to go to lunch, or have to go on my break, or I have an emergency that I need to deal with. I can go ahead and sign out. And now, when I come into the work order screen and I go back into that pending work order, you see that that current list is much smaller, but the completed is larger. And you also see that I have the Apply Changes button now active. So if I want to submit this to UPN as is without completing this pick list, I would simply just hit Apply Changes, or I can click on Add Item to Work Order, and I can put in another part. MOBILETrak will validate that part, making sure it's a good part, which in this case it's a lag screw. It's telling me which job I'm going to expense it to. This particular part does not have a defined bin location. I'm going to put in a quantity of 5. I'm going to hit Add Item, and now I'm back to my list, and that part that I selected is now down here in my completed list. So now when I'm ready to submit this, I simply just click on Apply Changes. It's going to push that back to UPN. Now, I got an error because I'm trying to expense out minor material, which is not allowed in UPN. And the part number that I'm trying to do incorrectly is the 607201, which is the part that we added to the work order. Now, any successful messages that pop up on the screen will show and then dissipate, but any error messages will require the user to actually swipe away the error, forcing them to deal with the error. So now, if I come back into my item that caused my problem, I scan it. Now I'm going to put in my quantity of 0, hit Update, hit Apply, and now I get the successful submitted job or work order message. All of those parts that I have just picked have now been submitted back to UPN. All my adjustments have been made. All my GL and all my accounting and inventory adjustments have been completed. And that's it for the work order module. We're going to take a look at the receiving module, which is very similar to the job release module in that it's built around lists and categories and being able to sort those lists accordingly. And just like the job release, we're going to simply just click on the receiving module, and it's going to look very similar. Here you see that I have a pending purchase order, which means that I've received material off of a purchase order, but I have not submitted that back to UPN. And so in order for me to go in there and complete that or submit it, I would simply just click on it and enter into the purchase order detail. Now, there's a couple different ways of finding a purchase order. If we know the purchase order number, we can simply scan the pack list if there's a barcode for it, or enter it in and put in a purchase order number. So it found that purchase order, just like it did in the jobs. It found it and displayed it for the user. Now I can go into that purchase order and I can see all the item detail arranged in the categories in the list, just like we did with the work orders. The only difference is here, instead of expensing it out of the warehouse and out of material inventory, we're bringing it into the warehouse or into material inventory. And just like with the job release, the PO detail screen is showing us the purchase order number. Any releases, in this case this one does not have a release, and who the vendor is, and then what the description of that purchase order is. Now, if I go back to my receiving screen and I go into this purchase order, now you may ask, well, what makes a purchase order in a pending status, or why would that occur? Well, you have a couple different reasons. One, again, if you got interrupted, or if you had to do something as an emergency, or you went home or whatever, and you didn't submit those. The other reason would be is that maybe this particular vendor is bringing the material in 2 different shipments, and you wanted to bring them into the warehouse all at once. So you would use MOBILETrak to receive the partial And then later in the day when they brought the rest, you would receive them and submit it. So that would be one of the reasons why you would have something in a pending status. And you notice we still have the same notifications. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to receiving. We're going to either choose our PO number that we know, but let's say we don't know the PO number, right? But we know one of the items that's on the purchase order. We can simply put in a part number, and MOBILETrak will go out to UPN and find all open purchase orders that contain that part number. So here's a big long list, right? So then I can simply just go into whichever purchase order that I want. Now, if I go back to receiving and I know my purchase order number, so I'm going to scan it from the pack slip. I'm going to go into the purchase order detail, which again is the one we looked at earlier. And you see I have the same structure of lists and categories. Now I can do the same thing where I can sort my list by item number or bin location, and I can sort it ascending or descending. And I can do that independently for each one of these categories. So here you see it's structured just like the job release. I have the item number, I have the description. If there is a bin location, it would be specified here. And then just like in the job release, it tells us that we have received 0 of the 15 that were ordered. Down here, you see that we have received 50 of the 60 that were ordered, which is why it's in this pending or partial status. Now you can also see here in the completed items that I've received 1 of the 1 that was ordered for each of these 2. So now I would simply just either scan the pack slip or select the item that I want to receive. If I scanned it, you see as I scan or as I type, it filters my list. It'll take me into the item detail, and it looks just like the job release. And because I have that validate part number setting enabled, I now need to actually scan the item itself. So I scan the part, tells me that it's valid, and I had that autofill turned on. So of the quantity 15 that I've ordered, MOBILETrak is defaulting to my received quantity as 15, and I haven't received any previously. I can change this quantity, or I can leave it as is, and I simply hit update. And now you see that my list for current items has gotten smaller, and my list for completed items has gotten larger. Now let's go to this part. We'll walk up to the bin or to the pack slip. We'll scan the part number, and we will make it quantity of 1, and we'll update item. Now you notice that my current item list has gotten smaller. My completed list has stayed the same, but now my pending or partial status has grown by 1 because I have this unit right here, this bolt, that I've only received 1 of the 2. Now let's say it's later in the day. I can come back from the main menu. You see that I have 2 pending. I can come back into receiving. MOBILETrak is telling me that, hey, you've got some stuff that hasn't been completed. And I could simply find that one that I was working on, re-enter, go down to that part that I didn't receive all of them originally, scan the part, put in my remaining quantity. MOBILETrak in the default field will subtract any previously received from the order quantity, so that's why I have quantity 1. Hit update the item. I go back into that purchase order that we were working with, right? Now I can go back into these other 2 items, and I can complete them as well. Go into this last one, scan my part. I'm okay with the 5 remaining, and let's even finish this last one. I'm okay with the 2, hit update. Now everything is in my completed, meaning that I've received everything that was on the order. If I hit apply changes, it's going to send it back to UPN, and again, make all the adjustments to inventory, make all the adjustments in accounting, and everything is all back to the way it should be. And then now if I go back to my main menu, you see that my notification went from 2 to 1. So the purchase order 62940 is no longer in this pending status. And that's it for the purchase order module.